Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It all started with a feeling that was hard to describe. The kind that shows up in your gut before your mind can even grasp it. Dylan noticed something different about Vanessa during a random Wednesday dinner. She was laughing, but not at him. It was a quick, clipped laugh tied to her phone, like she was in a separate conversation. He watched from a distance, pretending to eat while his mind silently asked questions. It was a kind of distraction that didn't match her usual behavior. Vanessa used to be present, connected, spontaneous. Lately, she had become someone else, always too busy to listen, always too distracted to look him in the eye. Dylan tried not to pay it much attention, chalking it up to work fatigue, the rush of everyday life, anything easier to swallow than the idea of being sidelined. But it kept happening. In the following weeks, she started coming home later, blaming endless meetings. She began taking more time getting ready, fussing over her hair with exaggerated care, testing different lipsticks, even changing her perfume. And he, who knew her details better than anyone, started feeling like this woman no longer lived in the same world as he did. One night, while she was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, she mentioned something casually, like it was just another social event. There's going to be a college reunion this month, the group is meeting after 10 years. Dylan asked if she was excited. She said yes, without much enthusiasm. But the way her eyes lit up told a different story. That night, she spent hours looking at old photos on the computer. He glimpsed names he'd never heard before. One stuck with him, Oliver. In the days that followed, the reunion became the center of Vanessa's universe. She bought 2 dresses, booked a salon appointment, changed her hair color. She even turned down a dinner with Dylan and 2 other couples, saying she was too busy getting ready. Half out of politeness, he asked if she wanted him to go with her. The answer came with a cutting smile, "It's just college people. You'd feel out of place." That hurt him. Not so much the words, but the way she dismissed him, like his presence would only get in the way. Dylan didn't argue. He kept it all in, every word, every gesture. And in that moment, an idea took shape. Maybe she already had someone in mind to go with her. When the reunion day came, Vanessa walked down the stairs like she was stepping onto a stage. Her tight blue dress hugged her body in a provocative way, her wavy hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and her high heels almost made her stumble. She hadn't dressed like that since when? Dylan tried to recall, but realized it had been too long. She was beautiful, sure. But it felt like a beauty meant for someone else's eyes. He took a chance and said, "You look amazing." She just replied with a cold, mechanical, "Thanks," not really looking at him. She adjusted her earrings in front of the mirror and grabbed her purse like she was late for something more important. He stood there, frozen, like he'd just witnessed his own exclusion. Vanessa said it was a simple, casual event, but it seemed like she was heading to something that could change her whole life. Dylan pressed her one last time, "Are you sure you want to go alone?" She hesitated for just a second and then said yes, he would be bored. The door shut, and the silence in the room seemed to mock him. The air felt heavy. His doubts turned into certainties in mere seconds. Dylan took a deep breath, grabbed his keys, and headed out a few minutes later. He had an address to follow and an intuition too loud to ignore. Dylan knew there was something behind her refusal to let him come. That night wasn't just a meeting between old classmates, he felt it too strongly to dismiss. So, when he left the house driving in silence, without music, without a clear destination besides following Vanessa, he wasn't just tailing his wife, he was following the hunch of a man who knew the patterns of someone he'd watched change right before his eyes. He had no plan, just the need to see with his own eyes what his heart had already started to accept. He followed her and parked across the street from a bar he recognized. It was discreet, on a corner, with dim lighting and a reserved vibe. A place that seemed perfect for meetups that don't ask for witnesses. When he saw Vanessa step out of her car and cross the street, her walk didn't match someone heading out to see old friends. She walked like she was anticipating something. Her eyes were searching urgently. Then she stopped. A man appeared right after, tall, confident posture, a well-groomed beard, and an expression that combined intimacy with longing. Oliver. The way they greeted each other left no doubt. There wasn't a respectful distance or a brief, polite hug. He pulled her in firmly, and she let him do it with ease. They stayed close for a while, like they were picking up where they left off. Dylan felt his chest tighten, but he didn't look away. He had to see it through. The two of them sat by the bar. Vanessa slipped off her coat, ran her fingers through her hair, laughed with her gaze down. She was flirting, no disguise, no guilt. Everything about it felt orchestrated, like the moment had been planned out through messages, secret arrangements. For a few minutes, Dylan was transfixed, watching every gesture that used to be his now being offered to another man like they were brand new. The way she touched Oliver's arm, leaned in to hear him better, tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. Little details that spoke louder than any confession. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the camera, and with steady hands took a series of photos, one after another, in silence. He was collecting evidence, not just of betrayal, but of the truth he had been denying himself. After more than an hour of conversation, they got up and left the bar. Dylan started his car and followed at a distance. They stopped in a back parking lot. He turned off his headlights and watched from afar, hidden behind a truck. And there, under the flickering light of a street lamp, he witnessed the scene that erased all doubt. Oliver pulled her in once more. She went without hesitation. And then they kissed. A long, calm kiss, full of familiarity. Like it wasn't the first time. Like it had already become part of their routine. It was too comfortable to be accidental. Too intimate to be recent. Dylan captured the kiss. More photos. More proof. But most of all, more clarity. The pain that could have exploded into despair turned into an odd calm. It was the kind of peace that comes only when there's no more doubt. He wasn't imagining things. It wasn't insecurity. It wasn't jealousy. It was reality, laid bare just a few feet away. When they both got into Oliver's car and disappeared down the avenue, Dylan stayed for a moment, breathing slowly, still holding his phone. The saved images looked surreal, but also as obvious as the past few months had been. He drove home slowly. The engine's hum filled the silence, and his gaze was lost in thought. Everything was rearranging in his mind. The excuses about working late, last-minute dinners, hidden messages. It all made sense now. Every one of Vanessa's actions had been part of something planned. A betrayal that began long before that reunion. She'd been drifting from him for quite a while. The kiss just confirmed what he already felt inside. Vanessa had made a choice. She just forgot to tell her husband, who was still living under the same roof. The next morning, Vanessa walked through the door carrying her shoes in one hand, her hair down, her face visibly tired. She tossed the keys on the counter and crossed the living room as though she'd come back from a perfectly normal night out. Dylan watched her from the top of the stairs. Silent. Still. It was like watching a movie where you already know the ending. She acted like nothing had changed, like he wasn't aware of anything. And that, more than the betrayal itself, was what sealed the end for him. The relaxed way she moved around showed a blind confidence that she still controlled the situation. It was as if he was too predictable, too restrained. She still believed she could steer whatever was coming next. Over the following days, Dylan kept his usual routine but acted strategically. He started clearing out his closet bit by bit, leaving only the essentials. He made copies of important documents, scanned personal records, did everything carefully. The goal was to leave without a trace, without her noticing. He hired a lawyer and filed for divorce based on the evidence he had gathered. Images that spoke louder than any testimony. photos that said what she would never admit. At the same time, he visited small, already furnished apartments. He picked a place far from their neighborhood, on the other side of the city, on a street she'd never go down by chance. Vanessa, meanwhile, went on as if nothing had changed. She still talked on the phone in their bedroom with the door almost shut. She still left for work dinners, coming back smelling of pricey drinks and sweet perfume. Dylan watched it all with a cool detachment. She believed he was still clueless, and that was all he needed to finish what he'd started. One evening, he waited for the right moment. Vanessa was on the couch, glass of wine in hand, laughing at something on her phone. During dinner, he casually mentioned, "I thought I saw someone who looked like Oliver the other day." She froze for a split second, almost unnoticeable, then tried to sound unbothered. "It's been so long I barely remember what he looks like." That was all he needed. Dylan noticed her effort to appear natural, the way she tried to dodge the topic, like she was trying to hide her guilt behind the excuse of time. He didn't call her out on it. He switched subjects, smiled, and let her think she'd gotten off the hook again. The next weekend, while she was out shopping with a friend, he finished packing. He closed suitcases filled with clothes and sentimental items, old photos, saved letters, memories that still connected him to who he once was. He left the rest. The house was just a shell now, an empty space hung with faded memories. Before leaving, he placed something symbolic on the kitchen counter, his wedding band next to a half-empty glass of wine. That was his answer. No words, no fights. A silent statement from someone who refused to beg for respect. When she got home and saw it, she would understand. The house would still stand, but her husband wouldn't be there. The drawers would still be neat, the furniture in its place, but where their partnership once existed, there would now be absence. He walked out with his head held high, certain he wasn't running away. He was simply ending a chapter she herself had destroyed. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't look back. Vanessa returned in the late afternoon, juggling shopping bags and scrolling through her phone. She was laughing at some text as she turned the key in the lock with her usual confidence. But something was off. The silence felt different. The lights were off, the house lacked any sign of life. She called Dylan's name, but her voice just echoed. She dropped the bags on the couch and took a good look around. The side table was empty. The picture frame of the two of them was gone. The closet door in the bedroom was slightly open, inside, a lot of empty space. His clothes were gone, along with his favorite sneakers. She went room to room, searching for anything that could explain it all. She found nothing. In the kitchen, on the marble counter, there was only a half-finished glass of wine and, next to it, the wedding ring. No note. No explanation. The silence spoke louder than any shout could. In that simple, cruel detail lay the revenge she never saw coming. An ending without scandal, with no chance to defend herself. A final goodbye, stark and unemotional, fitting for someone who chose to walk away with cold elegance. Vanessa leaned against the wall and slid to the floor. She stayed there, motionless, staring into the void she had created herself. That house, where she thought she still called the shots, now belonged to the echo of loneliness. Her phone buzzed with a group message, some trivial conversation. She set her phone down like it was burning her hand. She finally understood that the perfect life she thought she had under control had slipped away by her own doing. She tried calling Dylan that night, multiple times. Every call went straight to voicemail. She reached out to his friends, his family. Nobody knew anything, or they pretended not to. He had erased himself from her life with surgical precision, like blotting out a name in a book and rewriting the story from scratch. Across the city, Dylan watched night fall through the window of his new apartment. A small, quiet place where everything was his choice. Sitting with a beer in hand and his feet up on the balcony, he reflected on all the time he spent trying to be enough for someone who thought he was too little. He felt relieved. Relieved to have walked away without begging, to have ended it without giving in to anger. She would beg for answers. He wouldn't give any. Sometimes the loudest answer is silence. The real punishment is forcing the other person to live with what they destroyed. Vanessa spent the following days trying to piece everything together. Her routine became a cycle of ignored messages, unanswered calls, and a growing sense of suffocation in that house, which was far too big for one person. Over time, reality set in financially. They'd been renting, and even though she had a good job, her salary no longer covered all the expenses. The bills piled up. Things around the house broke down. The spacious couch where they once sat together was now just another reminder that he'd left, and trying to hold on to that space felt like propping up a castle made of wet paper. A few weeks later, the phone rang. It was Dylan's lawyer, requesting her presence at the office to sign the final divorce papers. The tone was straightforward, leaving no room for conversation. Vanessa refused immediately. She still believed she could turn things around. She tried everything. She wrote long emails. Sent messages with old photos. Showed up at the building where he used to work. Nothing worked. As a last resort, she went to see his mother, hoping that maybe the woman could convince him to at least listen. But when she arrived, she was greeted by a cold, measured expression. The woman said only a few words. "He told me you might come by. He asked me to give you this." She handed Vanessa a simple envelope, folded with care. Vanessa walked back out to her car with her heart pounding. She sat behind the wheel, hands shaking as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A few words in Dylan's handwriting: "Please don't look for me anymore." Attached to the back of the letter was the photo. The one from the parking lot, her and Oliver, kissing. Confirmation that he had seen everything. It was like a punch to her gut. The air felt heavy, she covered her face with her hands, and the tears came rushing out. She screamed alone, in her car, as if she could undo time with sheer regret. But in that moment, alone, she understood there was no going back. A few days later, with no other choice, she handed over the house keys. The rent was overdue and she couldn't renegotiate. She left without a fuss, taking only what fit in her trunk. She moved in with her mother in a far-off neighborhood, in a cramped, modest house where the walls barely blocked the neighbors' noise. Living together was rough, marked by old resentments. Vanessa, who always valued having control, now had to share space, ask for help, and listen to advice she didn't want. Her life boiled down to a small room, an old bed, and a memory stuck in her mind, the man she tossed aside without considering he might move on without her. And he did move on. No big scene, no explicit payback. His revenge was total absence. The indifference of someone who suffered in silence but planned things wisely. Dylan never had to raise his voice or explain himself. He did only what was necessary. He vanished from her life, leaving every memory stained by the pain of losing something she could never get back. Now tell me, if it happened to you, would you have the courage to walk away without shouting? If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.